Hi, how are you today? Okay, so first of all, I had forgotten to put up my chat thing in case anybody does comment. This is probably one of those lives no one comes for, but just in case. Okay, got that up. Now, so today we're here. I was watching a live stream because I was looking to see if I could find evidence of something else, to be honest, but that's no longer available because TikTok was taken down. But in the course of that, I ended up seeing a clip where Brown Pride Girl or BGP, or Brown Girl Pride, apologies, Brown Girl Pride or BGP, um, she she said some statements about the formation of American Sign Language, and I just kind of wanted to play that back, address it, and show you my sources for why I believe what I believe related to that statement and where I get my information from. And for context, I am hard of hearing, I am deaf, and I'm also mixed. My father is Native American, my mother is European. Here's my dad. And, you know what I mean? Like, this is also my dad. So, you know, and the formation of American Sign Language actually directly impacts my community because one of the main people who was committing genocide against deaf people and was in control of deaf schooling, and where the formation of American Sign Language took place was partly related to my tribe specifically that my dad descends from. Because Alexander Graham Bell, who is a deaf eugenicist, who was in charge of a lot of deaf schooling and education related to sign language and its solidification and formation, he literally had property. He's on the stolen land of Seneca, where I'm from. And so, yeah, this is not only my deaf history, I'm genetically deaf. My dad is also hard of hearing. Deafness runs in my family on both sides. So this is very much tied to my family history as it relates to not only where my dad is from as an Indigenous man, but also how we are deaf. And yeah, so I wanted to really touch base on that. And so we're going to play that clip, address it and everything. And also it kind of just surrounds some additional drama where BGP had been calling people out as it relates to Native American history. So I just thought for shits and giggles, after I go on my American Sign Language info dump, we can watch the rest of that. And we can also use it not only like as just kind of some entertainment, but also I do see it as an opportunity to reflect on like value alignment in terms of where do we get our sources from, and how are we processing our journey and understanding how we came to be, and the way we discuss that with other people, particularly when it comes to people who may have contradictory beliefs to some of the beliefs that we have value alignment with, if that makes sense, in terms of reflecting how we handled that as well. So yeah, I'm going to roll my intro, and then we're going to get right on into everything. It's a lot to cover, I think, so we might be here for a minute, but who knows, maybe I can bang this out quickly. Well, quick for me, I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to roll my intro, and then we'll get started. Thank you for being here. Hi, my name is Alexis, also known as Lexi or a deaf child. I was born deaf, hard of hearing. I began doing business as deaf child 2013, marketing 2011, sales 2009. I've earned 50 plus certifications in marketing and sales. My Bachelor of Science from Loyola University, New Orleans, with a music industry studies major and a business administration minor. Deafness runs in my family genetically. Speech is not fully accessible to me. Anyway, I'm here to bitch about whatever the fuck is on my mind. So here we go. Visit my site at noladeafchild.com. Okay, so first things first, what we're going to be looking at is this video here. We got a clip from, we only got to go like 10 seconds in to see what I want to address, but we got a clip from Toxic TikTok Unveiled of BGP speaking about other issues, but in that she starts off with making a comment on American Sign Language. So I just want to play that real quick. I'm going to address that comment, and then we're going to come back to this stream and watch it at the end, if that makes sense. So yeah. But real quick, what happened was, she said,
other languages, and we also had sign language, which is what ASL is created off of from the PISL. So like these are things that they don't.
So right there, where she says that American Sign Language was made off of Plains Indian Sign Language. That's what I want to kind of address here today. So, about that. Yeah, no. There's like, because it's kind of right, but it's also wrong, if that makes sense. Because, okay, so there are different sign languages that we had. We didn't just have Plains Indian Sign Language. That was rooted in Plains. You know what I'm saying? The formation of American Sign Language happened on the East Coast, not in the Plains. The formation of American Sign Language, ASL as we know it today, how it got formed, directly took place in the following regions. On Martha's Vineyard Island, in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Maryland area, that region right there, where the original fucking colonists came, back then, around the 1700s. By 1800s, American Sign Language is formed. From 1800, 1900, there were not, yes, language changes and evolves over time. So I'm not saying that there weren't changes made, but by that point, the language was in existence. It's past the formation. It's evolving from there, right? So the Plains Indians, when they had reached contact with the colonizers, that was more of in the 1700s time frame, rather than necessarily the 15 or 1600s. Roughly. I'm highly generalizing. So at that point, it was the other native signs that had gotten assimilated into it. Now, there are a lot of similarities because Plains Indian Sign Language and all indigenous sign languages had a lot of similarities. The reason being was because this was one of our modes of communication for trade and for general deaf access as well. Because we didn't have this deaf hearing cultural division in Native American cultures. Deaf were just already always included. We didn't have a divide. They included us in society through normalizing the mainstreaming of sign language in our society. And we not only use that for the deaf access and for any neurodivergent or related disability access, but also for trade. So to that point, our sign languages were understandable enough between us that we could communicate in order to get shit done. But there were a lot of regional differences in sign language. How Plains Indian signed isn't the same as how the West Coast signed or how the East Coast signed. Those are all different. But, so technically in the formation of American Sign Language, I do not believe that Plains Indian Sign Language was involved. I believe it was Eastern Algonquian Sign Language, and we're going to address some of those sources. But I do believe we can look at Plains Indian Sign Language because of the similarities, and use that to identify the Eastern Algonquian Sign Languages that were assimilated into American Sign Language. That's what I believe. And let's go into some of that. Previously I didn't want to do a reaction to this video because I felt like it was disrespectful because I never got the permission to, and I didn't want to, use their story without their consent. So I'm not gonna do a reaction to this entire thing. But in this video, they literally show you things like, for example, the American Sign Language way of signing, you know, to ride a horse or horse. That's the same as Plains Indian Sign Language. So how is that? How is that possible if American Sign Language had already been made when the colonizers came into contact with Plains Indians? How was that? Because of the similarities in all of the signs, even though there are differences. They also had a lot of the same shit. They just did it in a different way. Um, and so here they talk about, let's see here, they show a lot of the similarities. I don't know, man. I was gonna skip through it, but I really feel like this video itself really addresses some of the points I want to make. So I'm just gonna watch the whole thing. And if it ever does come down, you know, I don't know. I'll reflect on the value alignment and everything. But yeah, let's just watch this. Hold on.
My father, when he talked to my grandmother, they'd have to use these signs. For example, some of the basics was like yes and no, good and bad.
This is one of the oldest languages in North America.
This is a Crow Indian. This was a white person.
It's called Plains Indian Sign Language, one of...
What's interesting was their version for white is today American Sign Language. That's what you would call for a black person. And there's a lot of issues with wondering if there's racism rooted in that, because how would we sign ugly like this? How do you sign black like that in American Sign Language? But also, how do you sign beautiful in American Sign Language like this? How do you sign white person in American Sign Language like this? So there's a lot of racism also rooted in the origin, in the etymology of the American Sign Language as well, when you think of it like that. But this just reminded me of that, right? So it also can be very different. But yeah, because it's a mix, you know. So basically, with the formation of American Sign Language, I'm gonna get more into my sources in a bit. Basically, the English people, the British, the white people came over here, and so did the French. And they saw the way that the natives were signing. They convinced the natives to teach them their signs or whatever. And then next thing you know, they were like, hey, we made a new language. And they took Native American signs, claimed it as their own, and decided they made a new language that they really hadn't. So American Sign Language is actually a combination of French sign, Native American signs, as well as Martha Vineyard, which is kind of the same thing, because Martha Vineyard Sign Language is, they had white people come, they saw the Wampanoag tribe signing, they stole their fucking signs, and then they were like, hey, I made a new language. But in reality, it's really just white people. It's one of the first concrete examples we have of cultural appropriation and whitewashing of history. But yeah, okay, hold on. That's not my point, though. Let's get there. Hold up.
Of many Indigenous sign languages broadly known as hand talk that were once used widely by both deaf and hearing people.
It was the means for commerce. It was the means for economics.
Variations of hand talk were so commonly used that it would influence the formation of American Sign Language, or ASL, the predominant sign language used today in the US and Canada. But hand talk has mostly been written out of history.
And that's because, right, so back in the day when it happened, I felt a lot of it was tied to a lot of hearing people, because yes, to a point, deaf people were involved in upholding colonialism, but deaf people didn't have the power to maintain it or to really be the reason it was happening. They were just more of a byproduct of it, and within being a byproduct of colonialism, the white deaf here, I mean, not the native deaf obviously, but the white deaf, and by being a byproduct of colonialism, they then upheld it because that's what they knew. They weren't necessarily, not all of them, I guess some of them, because, you know, there's always problematic fuckers, but they weren't necessarily like known for upholding the ideology, because a lot of the tools of genocide get used against deaf people. So most deaf people that have value alignment with human rights issues, they're able to process what's happening to us and not want that for others. However, the deaf people in control, the deaf people that have resources, are often the ones engaging in problematic issues, to where then they look as if they're the representation of us, because they have the resources to be. And so a lot of deaf people are really problematic, but uphold fucked up shit. For example, Alexander Graham Bell, he's a deaf eugenicist known for our genocide. He had a deaf mother and a deaf wife. You know what I'm saying? Pick me ass bitches. Like, there's always going to be, problematic people engaging in these conversations. So back in the day, it would be those types of deaf individuals that would uphold what would become the genocide, right? And the whitewashing of deaf history in order not to maintain the native influence historically, right? But when it comes down to today, I think what that is tied to a lot of deaf people. Our entire deaf culture is based on American Sign Language. Our entire access in society and identity is based in American Sign Language. And a lot of deaf people are not willing to recognize the racism involved in ASL. And they're not willing to recognize the cultural appropriation and the history involved and the harm done to Native Americans from the formation of ASL, because that to them, then they would have to realize that their entire way of life is based off of Native American genocide. And a lot of people are not mentally willing to process that. And so they will, like, there's this deaf historian named Kathleen Brock, or Brockway or some shit. I keep fucking her name up. But Kathleen of Heritage ASL, she refuses to acknowledge the Native Americans' influence onto sign language. And she tells me I'm lying, and she goes on these news stations and says that that's a misleading misinformation idea, and she negates Native Americans and basically thinks that Native Americans don't know our own history. And so people like her have a lot of influence in deaf community. She's one of the biggest deaf historians there is, and she's against Native Americans and understanding how the formation of ASL is tied to our genocide. And so that's where a lot of deaf people get their information from. Even if they are trying to decolonize, this is what they're being taught, And so that's another reason it continues to be whitewashed, just because of racist people write the history, if that makes sense. But yeah.
When a Spanish colonizer first reached one indigenous community in the Southwest, he noted that indigenous people knew signs so well that there was no need for an interpreter. That sign language was likely a variation of hand talk, and these journals can trace it back to at least the 1500s. But if you look at a different kind of writing, the evidence suggests it goes back even further.
So my people, we've always believed that we have sign. So that's what I think. Like, I think that we were signing before we could speak. So that's just me because of the evidence that shows that. And another thing, so a lot of us deaf natives, we think that a lot of the petroglyphs or hieroglyphs that were left from our Native American ancestors, when you look at the pictures of them, a lot of people think they're just pictures of people doing something maybe. But when you pay attention to the image, you can see them signing in a lot of cases. And when you know the sign language, you know what they're trying to tell you. So a lot of it is documented by our own ancestors. Pay attention.
There's also rock writing depicting prayer versus a similar sign for prayer, or a symbol for elder indicating a person with a walking stick versus a sign for elder. And this, a symbol for hunger versus a sign for hunger. Hand talk, which researchers also call North American Indian Sign Language, has many regional variations.
So here is where I was saying that like BGP was partly right and kind of wrong. And here's what I mean by that. I say partly right because I think that all of our sign languages are connected. So I think that, from that reason where you say the formation of it tied to plain Indian Sign Language, that would be true in a way because I believe they're all connected when you get into the origins of it all, much like our spoken languages. But the reason I say it's wrong is because look at this map. The formation of American Sign Language had already occurred by the time the colonizers expanded to the Plains Indians. And if you look at history and you think of it in that reflection, and then it's like, wow, so if that's the truth, how is it possible? Because again, they're very similar, a lot of similarities, because all of our tribes would be trading with each other using sign language. And it was the means, there are evidence of my people trading with people, such as the Wampanoag. There's evidence of my people trading with even the Tainos. There's evidence, because when you look at it, we were all connected. We couldn't just get there like that, like today, but some of our ancestors would spend years traveling to each other to trade. And when you look at the borders as well, Plains Indian Sign Language, when you look at that border, they're basically in the middle of the formation of every other sign language. Isn't that interesting, right? That was here pre-colonially. And so I think that would make them more of like a hub for being the assimilation of the rest of the signs around them. They would have more connection to other signs than any other tribe may have in terms of the possibility of us having someone near us to sign a different dialect, right? And when you look at that map, you look at that history, you look at the formation of ASL, it's interesting to see that how not only is this proof that our ancestors used sign language to stay connected regardless of our spoken language differences, but they'll also explain more about how it was specifically the northeastern sign that was used in the formation of ASL, and that simply boils down to time period. It's not about negating the other sign language influences because they all influenced each other, they're all connected. But when you look at the historical events, the white man was not, it took them some time to expand over here to where the Plains Indian Sign Language is. They weren't just chilling over there, you know what I mean? That took time to get to. So let's see, what area is this? Like Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana kind of area right here towards the end. Let's, for example, Google, when did colonizers first contact Tennessee natives? Oh, so it did happen between 1540 and 1542 is when there was first contact from the French, but apparently there wasn't the same permanent settlement and exploration until the late 1700s, which is why I thought that, right? When you Google that, you can kind of see that here. I'll pull this up, add that in later. But when you reflect on that, like, how was our society formed? How did we reach? How were the institutions formed? When did certain people reach? This is just why I believe what I believe. Okay, let's keep going here.
Like Northeast Indian Sign Language here, or Southwest Indian Sign Language here, as well as tribe-specific variations within those regions. And here, from the Gulf Coast region up through the Great Plains into Canada, was the home of Plains Indian Sign Language. PISL is one of the most well-documented hand talk variations, probably because of how widely it was used.
Plains Indian Sign Language was the medium for communication of intertribal nations.
And that had a lot to do with how those tribes lived.
So she's signing that the Plains Indians followed the buffalo, they followed the food, they followed the seasons, and they traveled. And when they came into contact with other tribes, they would shift to sign language.
By the 19th century, tens of thousands of indigenous people were reported to have known PISL.
It was the standard language used just as English is used today at the United Nations, especially in commerce, in gaining intelligence, in hunting, even in warfare.
In PISL, there's no finger-spelled alphabet like you find in other sign languages. Its building blocks.
Yeah, they took that shit from French Sign Language. It's not the same as French Sign Language, but that's something, you know, yeah.
Are roughly 4,000 basic words that form its vocabulary. For the word war, you'd sign big and fight. For the word beautiful, you'd sign face and good. Or for stream, you'd sign the words river and little.
There is a stream on the other side of some bluffs over there.
The way PISL works also shows indigenous ways of thinking about the world. For example, let's take this simple question, how old are you? First, there's a single sign for question. So for a question about...
So they're saying that this one sign represents all questions. What, when, where, who, why, for all signs, you know, for all questions.
About someone's age, you'd use the motion for question with the motion for winter.
And they don't ask how old
How many
are you.
winters are you? That's what I ask.
In PISL, you measure months by moons, days by the sun, and to refer to different times of day, you would show hand placement according to the position of the sun in the sky. So this sign for morning, afternoon, or night. If you look at some of this side by side with American Sign Language, you'll notice some similarities, like a sign for moon, along with other similar words. Researchers believe another form of hand talk, Northeastern Indian Sign Language, was one of the contributors to ASL.
So there's the correction that I wanted to get to here. So, contributors to ASL include Northeastern Indian Sign Language, French Sign Language, and American Colonial Signing. How could Northeastern Indian Sign Language and Plains Indian Sign Language be so similar? Because it was universal. We would have our regional differences, but our sign in general was universal. Yeah. And we even have tribe by tribe differences. I think I'm gonna play a little bit more of this, or is it, shit. Yeah, I think I'm gonna play a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna play a little bit more of this, and then we're going to leave it alone. And if you wanna watch the rest of it, it's linked in the description of this video. So they're saying back in the old days when the American School for the Deaf was called the American Asylum for Deaf Mutes, there were Native people who went to school there. And they had a big influence on the development of ASL. Those would be my ancestors. My ancestors were involved in part of that because deaf schools were put, guess where? My ancestral fucking lands. One of the deaf eugenicists literally had a home there, where the Potomac tribe is today.
This film, from September 1930, shows one of the largest gatherings of intertribal indigenous leaders.
Okay, so now that's going into other things. So if you want to watch the rest of this or see what they're talking about and the rest of it and some other comparisons, this video is linked in the description of the video. But I'm going to keep going so that way I'm not just using their whole thing. But yeah, so that kind of backs up and provides a lot more context on what I wanted to correct by BGP here. And so now next thing I'm gonna do is play some of my old videos. So the context of me making these videos was originally to discuss American Sign Language, the formation of ASL, deaf history, and with the My Deaf History lesson series, that started as a way to educate hearing people, so that way I would have videos to send to people when I'm upset instead of just being like, well, fuck you, you're supporting eugenicists. I could send them the playlist and be like, hey, go educate yourself so you're not supporting eugenics. You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes you're too triggered to, in the moment, actually explain some shit to people. So I have these playlists prepped. So the My Deaf History lesson it comes from that, but in that context that also addressed the formation of ASL and its ties to Native American issues. Well, when that happened, I had two deaf white women try to gaslight me about if Native American Sign Language existed, including Kathleen, who I bitched about earlier, who's a fucking deaf historian. And so, yeah. I had them like basically fussing at me and arguing with me about whether or not that existed. Well, I did a whole live about that. That is linked in the description of this video if you want to go watch it. The live that I did about it is called Afternoon Kaboom, Indigenous Erasure, Native Discrimination, and Deaf Community Addressing Racism. In this live stream, it's about addressing racism generally in the white deaf spaces, which most deaf spaces are kind of white controlled in a way. So it's about addressing that generally. So I included not only an altercation within the Life Print, which is a learning group for ASL that I'm referencing, where I believe there was racism against natives in that post, in that thing. It's a whole thing. I also addressed this whole debacle again, giving you guys more context on this situation with the Kathleen Brockway and Kayayin, aka Wild Eggs. So previously I already did more commentary and provide more context of the following clips we're about to watch in this live stream. And that's linked in the description of this video. But I'm just going to play all of this because I find it highly relevant to what Brown Girl Pride. Why do I keep saying Brown Pride Girl? I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me. Brown Girl Pride is discussing here as it relates to the formation of ASL and deaf people stealing our languages. So yeah, like let's just get into it. I'm just gonna play all of these clips for a second. Hi, my name is Lexi and welcome to my Deaf History lesson, part 2. In 1817, the American School for the Deaf was opened, originally under the name the Hartford Asylum for the Education and Instruction of the Deaf and Dumb, which is a name that is extremely problematic. And this was opened by Mason Cogswell, Thomas Gallaudet, and Laurent Clark. French Sign Language and Martha's Vineyard Sign Language were combined to make American Sign Language. Martha's Vineyard Sign Language is an indigenous sign language native to that island. Basically, some white people came over here, they looked at the signs that the Native Americans were doing, and they were like, oh, we like those signs, we're going to take those and claim that we made a new language. This is why you really can't talk about the history of American Sign Language without discussing colonialism, or you're not really telling the full story. Feel free to ask if you... There were some disagreements in the deaf community about my usage of calling MBSL an indigenous language and referring to ASL as having partly colonized Native American sign languages. I think the misunderstanding was that they didn't see that I meant that as two separate ideas. But if the misunderstanding were on these facts itself, I'd like to prove evidence of that real quick. I already sent them like 20 sources on where I get my information from, but I just have 2 more sources that I'd like to show you. In this snippet, Eastern Kentucky University discusses the formation of the ASL from local sign languages, which would have been the Native American Sign Languages, Martha's Vineyard Sign Language, and French Sign Language. Here, Handspeak refers to Martha's Vineyard Sign Language as an indigenous language because it was created on Martha's Vineyard Island. There was provided a screenshot here from Duff Meach on how signed languages were used between Native Americans and the French during colonialism. I'm going to speak more here in the voiceover. Please pause to read any of the information. This is another video recording from Dawn Sign Press on the overall history of American Sign Language that I have been discussing in my Deaf History lesson, parts 1 through 12. The beginning of this also mentions that ASL was formed based on the intermixing of multiple signed languages, including local sign languages. Because there is evidence that the French, during their colonialism of Native Americans, were using their sign languages, I absolutely believe that ASL is based on also intermixing of Indigenous sign languages. I don't know, I think, did this one, oh, I just realized the sound got taken, whoopsie. The sound got taken off of this one, so let me add a link to it. This one should have the sound for that. Apologies, I'll need to link this in the description of the video later. Oopsie, wrong one. Question alone in. So I already did 3 videos on this question alone in context of the question regarding the formation of American Sign Language, Martha's Vineyard Sign Language, and colonialism. I just wanted to do one more video out of context. So out of context, this question, Indigenous Sign Language, which tribe, did they have alphabet, grammar, structure? Yes, Native Americans did have their own sign languages, and here's some more information about that. I have screenshot a great article from Start ASL that you can pause to read. This article shows the history of Native American hand talk before ASL. It also discusses the decline of hand talk after the formation of ASL or colonialism. Plains Indian Sign Language was used in American Sign Language, but a lot of Eastern Algonquian Sign Language was used in American Sign Language. I think if we look at American Sign Language minus French Sign Language, cross-referenced with Plains Indian Sign Language, then we can see the Eastern Algonquian Sign Language. In the future, I will make a video about Native Sign Language. Okay, so, what is up, exposure? So he's asking about the topic. Well, the topic that we're addressing is, Brown Pride Girl, did I say that right? Brown Girl Pride, no I didn't. Brown Girl Pride made a video, in a live stream, Brown Girl Pride made a statement, okay, I said it right that time, made a statement about the formation of American Sign Language, and she claimed that American Sign Language was formed off of Plains Indian Sign Language. And so far in this stream, I've kind of shown some videos of my past discussions related to this topic, where I also showed a source and explained why I believe that it was actually not Plains Indian Sign Language, but Eastern Algonquian Sign Languages that American Sign Language is formed off of, which is related to Plains Indian Sign Language, which is why they are so similar. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been addressing so far today. And I'm just going to replay that little clip real quick. So just a replay. before we keep addressing, and then we're going to go through some of my sources on this.
Other languages, and we also had sign language, which is what ASL is created off of from the PISL. So like these are things that they don't understand.
Exposure said sign language has been around for a long time. Absolutely. And I believe, there are evidence and sources to show as well that there has been sign language before there was even spoken language, So yeah. And I'll have to do a different live stream on that, pulling up those sources. But yeah, so right here, she was making the statement that it was formed from Plains Indian Sign Language. So what we've previously done was we went over a video from VOX about the hidden history of hand talk, and that has Indigenous people speaking on the history of Plains Indian Sign Language, as well as the history of the formation of American Sign Language from Northeastern Algonquian Sign Languages. And so, yeah, and that's kind of what we've been addressing. And in this video, I have a lot of my sources on this. And so I have about 40 minutes of me going on about these sources, including touching again on the exact same video we just watched about what I was telling you about. But what I think I'm going to do, honestly, is just go to this, let it play, and I might play it at like 1.5 speed. And if you want to watch it at regular speed, the original video is linked in the description below, and you can go watch it there. But I have all of these sources I'm going to link in the description of this video. I think they're already there. What I'm going to do is play my past video that I already did on all of these sources, which goes over the exact same fucking thing that I want to address today. In this video, though, I was addressing the racist deaf white woman I was telling y'all about, who were claiming that American Sign Language had nothing to do with Native American signs. I was addressing them in this video, so any of my commentary related to that would be towards that. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I was thinking about playing at 1.75 speed, but apparently a lot of hearing people don't like it when I do that. But that's normally what I do in these cases when I'm replaying my videos. I'll do it at 1.75 or 2 times speed. But people have been telling me they don't like that, so I'm gonna try 1.5 speed instead. But yeah. And yeah. Alrighty, so now I'm not gonna go over oh wait, is my fucking captioner working? Okay, sorry. I'm not gonna go over like everything in all of these sources, but I am gonna just kind of go through and just cover what feels right in the moment. I don't know. Some of the information that kind of just like guides you through where my thought process is. There's more research and more sources you can look into for all of this. And there's obviously differing opinions out there. It's up to you to decide what's in value alignment with your experience, beliefs, and education. Obviously, we know where I stand. And so, yeah. But fucking, first of all, I want to look at this little article from Psychology Today about how white supremacy is built into societies. And it talks about the ideology of white supremacy pervades culture in subtle yet pernicious ways. The key points of this article are that white supremacist ideologies permeates many cultures through subtle biases built into society's institutions. From childhood, biases and stereotypes unconsciously shape thinking and can accumulate into racism. Microaggressions and other forms of racist behaviors can have cumulative harmful... Okay, I said I wasn't going to 2 times speed this, but I'm going to just 2 times speed through the white supremacy part, and then when we get to the relevant part, I'll go down to 1.5 speed. Effects. Dismantling racist hierarchies rooted in white supremacy will require radical structural societal change. So yeah, and obviously, and the whole point of it is, where a lot of people, they only think of racism as the extreme KKK Nazis, but they aren't willing to recognize the day-to-day micro and the smaller things that are racist. It doesn't have to be extreme eugenics to be harmful. Like where they are literally saying that deaf indigenous culture has no face, and if a deaf indigenous woman feels mistreated, they should leave. In that Life Print Facebook group, yet they're still talking about deaf culture and stuff that's not sign language. It's just deaf social issues in general. But yeah, indigenous people aren't welcome to speak on that, but white people are. That is a... Oh yeah, I was also addressing, I was addressing what I felt would be issues related to anti-indigeneity within that deaf group. And then they were telling me that it wasn't the place that I should leave because it wasn't directly tied to learning American Sign Language. Meanwhile, they keep posting about other shit in there. So it's okay for them to not focus on only American Sign Language. But if I talk about how, hey, y'all are touching on racism, then it's not okay. Like, it was weird. It was a fucked up thing. So that was also a different conversation that happened in there, too.
Problem to me. That itself is an example. But whenever they are silencing me, that itself is also an example of Indigenous erasure. And so they don't see that as racism because it's not straight up fuck Indigenous people, right? But it is still racism. And so this article kind of explains like how that's built into society and how it adds up to become the fuck Indigenous people racism, right? And so the way Lightprint Facebook group treated me explains how it becomes like Kathleen Brock and Kayayin / Wild Eggs, where they have the audacity to dismiss Indigenous perspectives on Indigenous history that way. So yeah, moving on from York, we have white supremacy and whiteness. So it says white supremacy can be defined as the institutionalization of whiteness and white privilege and the historical, social, political, and economic systems and structures that contribute to its continued dominance and subordination. Francis Lee Ansley describes white supremacy in the following way. By white supremacy, I do not mean to allude only to the self-conscious racism of white supremacist hate groups. I refer instead to a political, economic, and cultural system in which whites overwhelmingly control power and material resources. Conscious and unconscious ideas of white superiority and entitlement are widespread, and relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenacted across a broad array of institutions and social settings. So, for example, in the Lightprint Facebook group, you'll notice that all the mods, in my opinion and my perspective, that were engaging with me on the issue were all white people. And that was 3 white people. Anthony, Tracy, and Monica, right? And so, I don't know if every single mod in that group is white, but I will say that when it's only being moderated by white people on Indigenous issues in that moment, and then they choose to remove my me as a voice, that's kind of like an example here. Anyway, and then Smith explains her framework titled The 3 Pillars of White Supremacy below. This framework does not assume that racism and white supremacy is enacted in a singular fashion. Rather, white supremacy is constituted by separate and distinct, but still interrelated logics. Envision 3 pillars, one labeled slavery or capitalism, another labeled genocide or capitalism, and the last one labeled orientalism or war, as well as arrows connecting each of the pillars together. Whiteness differs from white supremacy, in that whiteness is an ideology and logic by which one moves through the world, connected to dynamic relations of domination. It operates most obviously in white bodies, but also in and through racially oppressed bodies. Gilborn describes whiteness as a set of assumptions, beliefs, and practices that place the interests and perspectives of white people at the center of what is considered normal and everyday. And honestly, I feel in deaf community, deaf people do the same with hearing people, and I think that's also exemplified in the way that hearing people are coddled while they discriminate against deaf people in that group.
I thought about skipping through this, but now that it's playing, I do feel like it's kind of relevant when you think about the context of, how does Indigenous erasure persist in deaf community? I do feel these sources explain that. So fuck it, I'm gonna just keep this in here. I don't know.
But deaf people are essentially silenced for saying, hey, no, that's really fucked up, and here's why it's wrong. Just my opinion from my experience. So, it says, Bannon, 1967, asserted that whiteness is a process that corrupts the soul of the white man, and that has pushed the white man to believe that he is the master of the world. In her work, Hooks, 1992, wrote that seeing whiteness as a natural and people of color as racialized others leads white people to deny any representation of whiteness as terror or terrorizing. Critical whiteness studies theorists have explored how whiteness is invisibilized and normalized in our everyday lives. In part, through processes of race evasion or the assumption that white is not a race, they discern that whiteness is only invisible to those who inhabit it, to those who see it as a historical, and to those who deny its own creation. As such, whiteness operates as embodying the racially ideal subject and as a global privilege signifier, and tends to uphold whiteness as neutral and universal. Dandeka, I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong, I assume I am, posits that whiteness is predicated on the denial of difference within oneself, constituting in the white subject a core sense of self that is hidden from view and shrouded in shame. As individual experiences and backgrounds inform how one experiences whiteness, Dandeka, I think I'm saying that, I'm so sorry, I'm wrong, I'm so sorry, notes that the fear of exclusion from the collective leads whites to reject parts of themselves that could be seen as non-white. Ultimately, this guides racist ideologies and practices and creates white shame, which allows white people to ignore the harm caused by racial inequities. Yeah, and I think that literally explains what the fuck has happened to me in these situations. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, I apologize. I don't know if it's like more disrespectful and racist and rude to be butchering the name. I feel the need to say the name because I really want to give credit to who was saying this. So I apologize if that is wrong. But anyway, not anyway, but moving on, I guess. Ahmed, I'm saying this wrong too. Shit. I'm so sorry, fuck. Ahmed notes that whiteness gets reproduced by being seen as a form of positive residence, as it were a property of persons, cultures, and places. This narrative then allows for seeing the impacts of racism to be belonging to the individual, absolving responsibilities from the collective. So yeah, and it says over the years, the works of W.E.B. Du Bois, James Baldwin, and many other black scholars have been making visible the manipulations and pervasiveness of whiteness within the fabrics of our society. It is also important to note that whiteness, as an ideology and logic, can exist in non-white bodies too. Shah and Chanika describe a continuum of whiteness in which brown people, like other groups, being model minorities, may find themselves aspiring to whiteness and distance themselves from blackness in their appearance, politics, and solidarities. Other significant issues relating to whiteness and white identity are concerned with the theory that some non-Anglo-Saxon immigrants to the Americas became white. Included in this group are Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants. Yang and Koshi explored this assertion by explaining that rather than becoming white, these groups of people entered in the social status quo of the dominant society. They further assert that these groups are always white. There is some debate about becoming white, however, that does not delineate from the understanding that becoming white involves a social status classification change. In critiquing the logics of white supremacy, we consider the following. And here's why I'm just going to sum it up from here on out. So the 4 points that they consider: 1, dominance of liberal individualism; 2, permanence of racism; 3, ahistorical, decontextualized, and changing definitions; and 4, whiteness as normal and natural. So yeah, and it says by disrupting white supremacy in leadership, we consider several questions. 1, how do processes of racialization inform who is considered a good fit for leadership? 2, how does silence, denial, and compliance operate to protect white power and punish efforts at anti-racism, anti-black racism, and anti-indigenous racism? 3, what wisdoms, experiences, and perspectives are denied when anti-colonial and anti-racist leadership practices are not centered? 4, how might centering the counter-narratives of indigenous, black, and racialized people expose dominant narratives of colorblindness, meritocracy, and neutrality while promoting self-authorization and challenging objective truths? 5, how how might we consider reverse pipelines to increase the representation of Indigenous, Black, and racialized leaders who lead for anti-racism? So yeah, I love that article. Definitely make sure you read more about the 4 critiquing logics of white supremacy to consider. So next up, let's talk about hand talk, the Native American sign language that predated ASL.
Okay, so here is what we are really here for. Now I'm going to move this down to 1.5 speed, and again, it's at the original speed in the video link below.
So yeah, Native American Sign Language, or hand talk, was developed centuries before American Sign Language came into being. So this is part of what I was arguing with Kayayin, also known as Wild Eggs, as well as with Kathleen Brock about, was the existence of American Sign Language and how of Indigenous Sign Language in the Americas, as well as how ASL was influenced by it. So yeah, literally, American Sign Language would not exist without the colonialism of America. And if you're arguing with me about that fact, you and I really do not align on much of anything. And that kind of highlights the white supremacy issue that is still dominant in the deaf community today. The way I was treated in life print by speaking out on this, and the way that, you know, Kathleen Brock, who claims to be this esteemed deaf historian, treated me and all that, you know? So, Native American Sign Language, or hand talk, possesses 4 essential parameters: hand location, hand movement, hand shape, and hand orientation. So yeah. And as I was saying, the Indigenous people of North America, we didn't have a unified culture because each of us have our own cultures, right? There are unified things about our cultures, but each of us still have our own individual culture, if that makes sense. And so yeah, instead, we have our own language, social structure, belief system. But what we all had was hand talk, or Native American Sign Language, to communicate. So yeah, it was universal. And it does cause about the decline, but what they don't really articulate good enough, in my opinion, is the colonialism, the genocide, the cultural eradication, the way that we were punished for signing, you know? So, yeah. This other article from the week about erasing Native American culture talks about how the United States and Canada forced Indigenous kids into abusive boarding schools. And for us, they did the same thing by forcing deaf Indigenous people into their deaf schools as well. That was part of our deaf assimilation and Native American assimilation. And part of Kathleen's argument to me was, well, we forced them into our schools years later, so your argument's invalid. That makes no sense to me, but I'm not going back there. Anyway, it's literally just admitting what I said happened. We just have different opinions on the result, in my opinion. So yeah. So these schools, they forced us to give up languages and cultures of our ancestors. And yeah, and this was mandatory. It was an attempt to wipe out Native identity, language, and culture. And there's a quote where, you know, they say, "Kill the Indian, save the man." And this is from the Carlisle Indian School. So, yeah. And they forced Indigenous people into these deaf schools too, and treat us terribly. So, there's also an article here on Native American or American Indian Sign Language Guide. And so it's discussing how, this article discusses how Indian Sign Language may be a first universal language produced by people. So yeah, and it talks about the origin of it and some of the grammar involved in it, and things like that. So in this sign language, you know, a lot of the words are different, but you'll see, for example, a cross. Native American Sign Language, when you cross like this. Now let's Google real quick. What is French Sign Language for a cross? There is none. There's a through. So isn't that hilarious? That's an example right there where this is an Indigenous sign that white people stole and claim it was theirs, right? With American Sign Language. But when I talk about it, I'm the fucking problem. Anyway, so there's more examples. There's more examples. If you compare American Sign Language to French Sign Language and to Indigenous Sign Language, you see all of the Indigenous signs. And it's just mind-blowing to me that white people are so gung-ho on just fucking literally erasing all existence of Native Americans and our contribution. So yeah, so this article goes into more examples of some Indian signs. Highly recommend checking it out, as well as our grammar and all of that. So to all the people,
You know, I'm just realizing, you know, like, you know how we just say things without thinking about it because they're expressions I've just heard forever? I wonder if gung-ho is racist. Like, I don't even know the etymology of that. I don't even know what the fuck it means. You know, it's just like some shit you've heard and you've said forever. And then it's just like, but that can't be good, right? Like, I need to look into that one, right? So, oops. But interesting to think about.
people acting like we don't exist, fuck you. And so this other article covers the 10 stages of American Indian genocide. This one you do have to Google and then download it. So it's one of those PDFs. When you find it online, it downloads as a PDF. If you're comfortable with that, that's how I was able to access the whole thing for free. So I can't share the link to you because it's a download on my computer. So if you don't have the file downloaded, the link from me won't fucking work. You might already know that. In case you know that, I apologize for the mansplaining, but some people don't know that, and that is okay. That's okay. We're all on our own journeys with technology. It's okay not to know. I don't know. Anyway, so there's 10 stages of American Indian genocide. I'm just going to read the abstract. It says, to better serve the American Indian population, it is essential for educators, including professionals in the helping field, to understand how the United States federal program over the past 200 years used 6 different strategies to address quote-unquote America's Indian problem. Using the Stanton's 10 stages of genocide, the authors explore American Indian Holocaust and genocide and their impact on the behavioral health and well-being of Native peoples in Indian country. The purpose of this manuscript is to expand and deepen the views of educators in such a way that influence and affects their professional practice with the American Indian populations they serve. So yeah. Y creo que es en español también. Y lo siento porque mi español es muy malo. Okie dokie. I said, and I think it's in Spanish too, but I'm sorry because my Spanish is very bad. I don't even think I said that right. And if I didn't say that right, that's even funnier. But yeah, so this kind of goes into the case for the American Indian genocide and how we were treated as genocide. I'm not going into all of that because this is about this is about Indigenous genocide in deaf culture and in America in general. And, you know, there couldn't be any deaf genocide in deaf culture if hearing people didn't start it. You know what I mean? Because hearing people were writers of the deaf cultural division to begin with. So it's like all connected for me and to me. You know what I mean? But yeah, so this really goes into explaining more the history of the abuse that we have experienced in the specific forms of why it is genocide and things like that. But let's just check out this conclusion real quick. It says, genocide is the destruction of a people. Given contemporary examples of genocide, it is easy to believe that it takes place within a short, defined period of time. However, according to Limkin, the architect of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide and the creator of the word genocide, genocide does not necessarily mean the immediate destruction of a nation, rather to signify a coordinated plan with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. For almost 200 years under United States federal governance, there was a concerted effort to erase Native peoples from the American landscape. Tribal communities were exposed to extraordinary levels of violence and ever-increasing levels of alienation, exclusion, and marginalization by the federal government. According to Limkin, 1948, there are 2 phases to genocide: destruction and imposition. Destruction is the annihilation of a people, which includes their political, social, and economic institutions, their culture, language, religion, and their sense of individual security, freedoms, physical and emotional health, and dignity. The second, imposition, is the act of imposing the oppressor's national values and beliefs on the oppressed. Both have been the practices of the United States federal government in its relations with Indian tribes and peoples. Limkin stated that whoever, while participating in a conspiracy to destroy a national, racial, or religious group, undertakes an attack against life, liberty, or property of members of such group is guilty of the crime of genocide. It would seem, given American history, that genocide accurately portrays United States federal policies. More importantly, American Indian genocide continues in this country. Stanton states, denial is actually a continuation of the genocide because it is a continuing attempt to destroy the victim group psychologically and culturally. Certainly, this is the experience of Indian peoples, although it is impossible to accurately gauge the implications of the traumatic events that befell American Indians under the government of the United States. What is clear is that the massacres and near annihilation of Native peoples have not been admitted, nor have amends been made. Like the victims of genocide everywhere, Native peoples want the crimes against them acknowledged. This is essential for healing. So yeah, let that reflect and everything we've been talking about. You see the connection? So yeah. And then from Handspeak, we have Martha's Vineyard and Island and Sign Language, a little article here. So what this talks about here was, as the first school for the deaf was founded in Hartford, Connecticut in 1817, many deaf students from the islands attended this school. Their language was intermingled with Old French Sign Language, which was brought by the French deaf teacher Laurent Clerc from France. Eventually, these island inhabitants settled down on the mainland. A number of signers on the island eventually declined to the mid-20th century. In the meanwhile, tourism and its economy grew on the island. The last deaf person born on the island died in the early 1950s. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okie dokie. So here we go. We have, from Watchlist, The Hidden History of Hand Talk, published by Smoke Signals. And it talks about Indigenous Native American Sign Language called Hand Talk. And so it talks about Hand Talk used as intertribal language. It talks about this video focuses on Plains Indian sign languages, as well as there are other hand talks as well. And we don't see them communicated due to residential schools' effort to exterminate us, including hand talk. So yeah. And it also talks out that American Sign Language was influenced by Northern American Indian Sign Language. My people, bitch. Yeah. So anyway, we'll check out that video. I'm gonna link to it. I'm not gonna play the whole thing because I didn't get permission to, so I don't want to play it or anything like that. But it's definitely gonna be linked in the comments or the description of the video, depending on where things end up needing to be moved. But yeah. We have this other article from Open Culture on this video. It says the hidden history of hand talk, the Native American language, the Native American Sign Language that predated ASL by centuries. It says no one person can take credit for the invention of ASL. It's, early signs, was forms used by deaf communities in New England with French Sign Language. But, yeah, so the deaf people there, they were using the indigenous signs because they saw the signs that Native Americans were using, and they would just start using the ones they like in a different way, or force Native American people to teach it to them, But yeah, it talks about how, the indigenous sign, being intertribal again. It also discusses the cultural assimilation of Northeastern Indian Sign Language, as well as how Native American children were forced to attend the American School for the Deaf, which was then called the American Asylum for Deaf Mutes. It talks about our Indian signs' influence on ASL and compelling evidence for it as well as the film of this Indian Sign Language Brand Council. Where American hearing people, the same people that were creating American Sign Language, they were studying us signing. Y'all don't think they were fucking taking and using that shit? American Sign Language is one of the very first documented forms of cultural appropriation in the Americas that we can see of indigenous culture. You know what I mean? So, but their indigenous sign language was forced to assimilate, because people would always be like ASL is superior. So that's another reason it's so triggering for not only me, but any deaf indigenous person when you have white deaf people gaslighting us on indigenous issues in deaf community relating to sign language. So, not only, so there's 2 videos related to that. First, let me pull up this one first. So first we got the hidden history of hand talk. So this is the video. This is the video that those other 2 articles we're talking about, the hidden history of hand talk. It's linked in this description of the video. It might get into the comments. Try to keep it in the description. So this one right here, it talks about a bit of history couldn't fit into the piece. So it talks about all this history that we've been discussing, but let's just read the description of this video, right? So it says centuries before we had American Sign Language, Native Sign Languages, broadly known as hand talk, were thriving across North America. Hand talk would be influential in the formation of American Sign Language, but it has largely been written out of history. One of these hand talk variations, Plains Indian Sign Language, was used so widely across the Great Plains that it became a lingua franca, a universal language used by both deaf and hearing people to communicate among tribes that didn't share a common spoken language. At one point, tens of thousands of indigenous people used Plains Indian Sign Language, or PISL, for everything from trade to hunting, conflict, storytelling, and rituals. But by the late 1800s, the federal government had implemented a policy that would change the course of indigenous history forever, a violent boarding school program designed to forcibly assimilate indigenous children into white American culture, a dark history that we're still learning more about to this day. Because of a forced English-only policy, the boarding school era is one of the main reasons we lost so many native signers, along with the eventual dominance of ASL in schools for the deaf. Today, there are just a handful of fluent PISL signers left in the United States. In the piece above, we hear from 2 of these signers who have dedicated their lives to studying and revitalizing the language. They show us Plains Indian Sign Language in action and help us explore how this ancient language holds centuries of indigenous history. And so here's another issue I take with anytime a white person or even a white deaf person or a hearing person is telling a deaf indigenous person anything about what language we speak, it's fucking discrimination. It's related to our fucking genocide, okay? Because I would be signing my native signs if it wasn't for fucking colonialism. So, when you are deaf and indigenous, you're expected to know either English or Spanish or French, depending on where you live and where you're colonized. For example, if you're indigenous to the Americas, so for me, indigenous to the United States, that means I'm expected to know English. I'm expected to know American Sign Language. I'm expected to learn my indigenous fucking language. I'm expected to learn my indigenous fucking signs. Do you know how much pressure that is? Do you know how many words we have to learn? You know how incapable the human mind is of processing this much? Anytime you make fun of a deaf indigenous person for language deprivation, it's discrimination. Anytime you weaponize that to us, it's discrimination. You never convince me otherwise. So yeah, in all of this, it's where they were saying that us indigenous people are not reliable sources on deaf, indigenous, and ASL history. That will never not piss me off. That's always going to be racism in my opinion. And they also said from the Vox post regarding these creators here, here's a bit of history we couldn't fit into the piece. During the late 1800s, the push to assimilate indigenous people into white America paralleled another movement, the push to assimilate deaf people into speaking culture. It was called oralism. Proponents, like Alexander Graham Bell, deemed sign language uncivilized and pushed for lip reading and spoken English education. By 1880, they even passed an international resolution that banned sign language education. Though this resolution mostly affected white schools, it wasn't until 100 years later that ASL would be recognized as a fully formed language. But as we reported in the piece, there was no big renaissance of Plains Indian Sign Language at that time. Native hearing students were forced to speak English in boarding schools, and native deaf students in many cases were forced to replace Plains Indian Sign Language with American Sign Language. And so then in this other video, we show examples here where they show differences between American Sign Language and Plains Indian Sign Language for specific words and compare the differences. And so yeah, you should check that out. I'm not going to go through it here because I did not get permission, but I just want to pull this up. So next up, from Don Sign, we have in the history of American Sign Language, it says, even though American Sign Language has strong roots in French Sign Language, it is deeply influenced by many events preceding the more formalized sign language that flourished since the 1700s. So yeah. And it talks about the white people's influence here. And it talks here about there were students from various New England cities, including Martha's Vineyard, and that they had their own sign language. And among the possible sources of the present American Sign Language would be clerks' French signs, as well as the home signs these students brought from home and these small scattered deaf communities, as well as these new signs generated in the settling of the school. Today's American Sign Language was strongly influenced by these signs, and the students who graduated would go to different states and pass that on to other generations. That became today's American Sign Language. So here's another example that shows where Martha's Vineyard was perceived as an influence, right? So yeah. We have another article here from Deaf Niche. Talks about the Native Americans and sign language. And it said Native Americans needed it for communication back then. So we use it because we all spoke different languages, but we would have our hand signs to communicate and trade and things like that. And we also use these signs with the Canadian First Nations and the French, as well as Native Americans with the British and the Dutch and the Spanish as well. We were using these signs with these dip bucks too. This is how American Sign Language came to be. So yeah. As well as our numbers and things like that. And so from here on, I just want to remind you guys of my parents. Thanks, Mom and Dad. I've got mixed ancestry. Now, if any of these people that I've been speaking. Okay, and so then that stream goes into other shit. Now, there's my mom and dad, though. They look good. Both of my parents are batshit crazy, but both of them are good looking. You know, you can call me crazy all day, but you can't call me ugly. The proof is in the pudding. Look at the factory, where the factory manufactured this. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm sorry, that was fucking weird. But I do think both of my parents look good. But anyway, sorry. Fucking weird. But, so, in the description of this video, all of these sources right here, I believe I linked these all, if I'm not mistaken, in the description of the video you're watching now. All of my sources are usually always linked in the description. I say usually because there was a time period between, I think, 2023 and 2024 maybe, that I was like, if I had already put all of the sources for something, I would just link the video where those sources are at. But I'm trying not to do that anymore. Instead, I'm trying to make sure I link those sources every fucking time. So that way it's more accessible and easy for you. But I don't mentally have the capacity to go fix the past. So we're just going to go forward. But you know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, so that is there a bit. But overall, for the most part, you'll find a description and the comments, my sources linked. But yeah, fucking, and so they get moved to the comments when it comes to timestamping a lot of times. So, you know, and just check that you hit, if you're doing the top comments, which is the default thing, it won't show all of the sources. So sometimes you do have to hit newest to get all of the sources, especially on the ones where I got a lot of sources and a lot of comments there. But yeah. So, if you want to look at all of these visuals better yourself, all of the images should be linked in, I mean, not all of the images, all of the links should be put in the video. I was thinking of how the image quality may not have been good enough whenever we were watching that. There are times that sometimes I'm really good at making sure I zoom in, making sure you can see everything, and sometimes I'm really bad at it, and this was one of those times I was really bad at it. But yeah, so
And there's a lot more that I covered in this live stream, but basically y'all watched most of after the break, so you can go back, just watch before the break and then go to the conclusion, and you'll be up to date on that if you do rewatch that stream yourself later. But yeah, so that kind of touched on and already had the sources compiled for a lot of what I wanted to touch base on here as it relates to where do I get my information from for the sources and the history of American Sign Language as it relates to Indigenous people particularly. And yeah, another video I want to highlight is I do have a video here about the overview and recap of Alexander Graham Bell and did he contribute to colonialism. And so he's one of the ones. He's not the guy that created deaf schools in the United States, because that's a couple of other people get that honor, if you want to call it that. But he is one of the most influential people that ran deaf schools, if that makes sense, in our time. Not in our time, but I guess like in the colonial time, you know, if that makes sense. But yeah, so he actually fucking in this video it has a bit more information on all of this, but he actually had one of his houses, guess where the fuck it is? Guess where? Guess where? Just guess. So this right here would be Virginia. You know what's interesting about Virginia? You know what's interesting about Virginia? Guess where my dad is from? Seneca. He's a motherfucking Powhatan. Capture did not get that right. Powhatan. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? My dad descends from 3 of Johan Seneca's daughters, as well as other people. Didn't get that right either, fucking captioner. I'm gonna fucking spell it. WAHUNSENACAWH. Shit, yeah. So, fucking, yeah, so fucking, you know what I'm saying? So, like, this is the thing where I'm like, when deaf people talk about disliking AGB, because there's like a saying in deaf community, which would be, if AGB has no haters, then I'm dead, right? People say that all the time, and I'm just like, no. You don't understand. But yeah, I feel like deaf Virginia Indians get the top honor on that game, you know? That's just me. Y'all can disagree. But so in this, I also have a bit more information. I kind of go over some of those sources, but I also go over more sources as it relates to the history of the formation of ASL and deaf culture and deaf issues and Alexander Graham Bell's particular influence on those things. And the concept of colonialism, more particularly in this live stream. It's linked in the description. So yeah, y'all can go watch that there. And if you want more information on my YouTube channel page, I have, like, if you go to the my page and then scroll down and you click the thoughts on deafness, accessibility, and the ADA, you hit view all on that. I have a lot here for you guys. So I have a whole video on learning ASL. I got one on Deaf Awareness Month. A bunch of good deaf shit is in here. My deaf history lesson, the Alexander Graham Bell live streams. This one is a general one on deaf law, deaf social progress, and deaf history under disability law. This one's about a particular situation of people, hearing people especially, gaslighting me on deaf and ASL issues. So yeah. And Indigenous issues. One of them, I think, was actually potentially Native ancestry descent. Potentially, I believe, in my opinion. But the other one, that was a white bitch, man. Fuck you. And the other one, though, was still a hearing bitch, probably being anti-deaf in my opinion, though. So yeah, and then I've got I have a few different playlists on Alexander Graham Bell, but this one is just the live streams I've done on him that are just this dedicated live stream series I did on him, and I kind of should do more on that. Then I have another one on all videos that mention him, which I should probably add this to. And then I have another one, I have two more on publications he had. So he wrote a memoir upon the formation of a deaf variety of the human race. That was one of his books. And in that book, he was basically writing about how the existence of deaf people is a calamity to the world, and we need to do everything we can to stop it by whatever measures possible. And in this thing, he literally says that we should use the law to suppress deaf ability to have intermarriage and to be together. And then he gave he published and gave a speech to another publication which is called Marriage, an address to the deaf. And in this article, he claims he never said or did any of that. We just have it in his head that he doesn't want us together. It's not that we shouldn't get married, it's that we shouldn't have kids. For real. For realsies. I'm not lying. These playlists have those links in the description of those videos as well. And so then, did I say more of my deaf history lesson? My deaf history lesson is a series, and more of my deaf history lesson is about shit that touches on this shit, if that makes sense. Am I like saying my words right? I don't know. Read my mind, you get the fucking point. Okay, let's keep going. I also did another thing. So John F. Stanton is a deaf attorney, and he wrote, I don't know what to call this, an article, a publication, called Breaking the Sound Barriers, How the American with Disabilities Act and Technology Have Enabled Deaf Lawyers to Succeed. And it's like a really good informational piece on the entire fucking history of deaf people working in law, particularly as lawyers, and I love it. I fucking love it. And I hate it, and I love it, you know. So maybe in hindsight, maybe I was too judgmental of John in there, but I don't know. What's up, John? I don't know if he's ever seen that. Anyway, and then Ixon versus Lawfer was a Supreme Court case. I believe it was 2023. Maybe that happened, or 2024. Shit, I forgot. I think it was 2023. Where basically, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a hotel being sued by somebody whose job it was to sue people under the American with Disability Act if they were providing accommodations for disabilities. And the Supreme Court case wanted to drop that on the basis of no merit, and I kind of provided some of my commentary on that. And in reflection, I think, you know, I don't understand the law enough to understand like different legal reasons they could say there's no merit to the case based on the law, but it's good commentary based on principle of the matter of should disabled people have access. Either way, I think. But yeah. And then I did another one, particularly on the concept of deaf in music, because a lot of people think if you're deaf, you can't be in music, and that's just not the case. And there's a lot of deaf musicians, thank you very much. So, and deaf entertainers in general. And like even Jackie Chan, he's deaf. He knows Chinese Sign Language. And Stephen Colbert is deaf. And I think, isn't it Neil Young that's also deaf, if I'm not mistaken? Why do I think Neil Young is deaf? Is Neil Young deaf? Not completely deaf, but yes, he's hard of hearing. Hard of hearing's deaf too, bitches. Suck my dick. So is another one. Who the fuck is it? Why am I blanking on it? God damn it. I should know this. Fuck it. But there's a lot of deaf. Let's just Google that. Deaf musicians. We're out here. Fuck. I can't spell musicians. This is fine. Deaf musicians. Okay, so obviously they decided to put Beethoven and whatever. Oh, Eric Clapton, you're deaf now? What's up, Eric? Nobody talk about the Eric Clapton joke. But Phil Collins, okay, interesting. There's got to be some more. Come on, give me. Oh, will.i.am. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Will. Oh, Grimes is deaf too. Interesting to know. Oh, they put Matt Maxey on here with, yeah, love that for him. And Wawa, of course. Yes. I don't know who a lot of these fucking people are, but you can see we exist. People are out here. I'm here. I exist. I've forced y'all to listen to my demos previously. Anyway, apologies. I'm getting off the point. Let's get back to sign language. I need to remember to link that later. We covered all of this. I was getting through this. Okay, so also, there's just a lot more. I've got my deaf journey. I've got content including specific deaf people in here. I've also got videos including Alexander Graham Bell's memoir that I talked about earlier. Another playlist on hearing opinions versus deaf lived experience. Then I've got content in sign language as well as content about sign language. And last but not least, the Jello program reporting is about a person who is harassing deaf community. And if y'all want to see more on that, you can go watch it there. So, next up, before we get to finishing the rest of this clip, which is what we're about to do, we're just going to watch the whole fucking thing. I want to show you guys some books I have on sign language. So if you're thinking about getting sign language books, I want to talk to you real quick about identifying books that should be helpful for you. Because if you just go to Barnes & Noble and you look at the American Sign Language section, there's a shit ton. You know what I did to narrow down my top choices whenever I went? So first thing I did was I pulled out every single one of the sign language books, every single fucking one. And then I Googled all of the authors, and I made sure that I was getting books from deaf people. And I put all of the ones that did not have a deaf author involved back on the shelf, because I'm not buying that. So then after that, I couldn't spend all of that money though, because I'm kind of, struggling on the struggle bus. This one was $25. This one was $18, $17.99, and this one was $25 as well. So that's $50. That's like 70, 75 with tax. And I was like, okay, I can't be spending that much money right now. So whenever I got these books, though, I decided to narrow it down to my top 3 choices. There was only one Native American Sign Language book, so I'm definitely getting that. So then I decided to get 2 more regular American Sign Language books. And I decided the reason I chose the ones I chose was I looked at the ones that had the most number of signs. And I chose the top 2 that looked like they had the most number of signs and got those 2. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to get the best bang for my buck, is what I figured I could be going with there. And so that's how I narrowed down my choices. And so not in any particular order, just in the order I've picked them up. I got Learn American Sign Language, Everything You Need to Start Signing. It's a complete beginner's guide with 800 signs. And this one is by James W. Guido. So, yeah, I got this book on American Sign Language. I've got this book right here, American Sign Language Made Easy for Beginners. It's a visual guide with ASL lessons, signs, and quizzes. And this one is by Travis Belmontes-Merrell, and his last name is hyphenated, and it's with an S, not a Z. But yeah, so that one. And so what I've been doing is comparing signs from those 2 books with, it's just upside down. Whoops. With Talking with Hands. This is Everything You Need to Start Signing Native American Hand Talk, a complete beginner's guide with over 200 words and phrases. And I don't know how to say his last name, but I believe it could be Mike Pahsetopah. That could be very much wrong. But he is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and he is also of Yuki. Am I saying that right? Is it Yuchi? I am so sorry. I should learn how to pronounce that one. Ooh, that's fucked up. Y-U-C-H-I. I'm so sorry for saying that wrong. Yuchi, Osage, and Cherokee descent. So, yeah, I've been comparing signs from these books. And my theory, I do believe we can identify, because there's differences, but they're similar. And I think we can definitely identify, like, because we remove what isn't in here in terms of the way that it was signed, right? Because, for example, Indigenous signs, they don't use alphabet the same way as American Sign Language. You know, they don't do the numbers the same way either. But a lot of the other signs, you know, like moon, American Sign Language stole, right? And so if we go look at those signs like that we used in the way we used it, and we remove from American Sign Language what we didn't use, you know, then I feel like we can see what's left behind to identify that regional difference from Plains Indian Sign Language, which would be Eastern Algonquian Sign. And I think if we narrow down on that with Martha's Vineyard Sign Language too, if possible, it's people call it extinct, but I think there's people out there that still know it. We do that, we can identify specifically Wampanoag sign, I think. You know, like, I think it can be done. And there are elders, there are deaf natives who do still sign. It's just not recognized by authorities. But there are people who do sign and can tell you what is or what isn't, you know, their signs that they recognize from our ancestry. You know what I mean? Like, it's, for example, they call Kikitawomek a dead language, which is Powhatan Algonquian, but why is it still spoken if it's dead? You know, I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so those are my book recommendations. And now I kind of want to just finish out. I guess we'll just restart it. Obviously, y'all know how I feel about the situation here with the Plains Indian Sign Language comment. Like, I don't believe it was actually from Plains Indian Sign Language, because American Sign Language is already formed in that time frame. I think it was more influenced by Eastern Algonquian Sign Language, but I think Plains Indian Sign Language and all Native Sign Language influence each other, and so therefore it was also in that way still kind of influenced by it. But I don't think that's accurate, because that's why there are differences. Or part of why there are differences, in my opinion. But also because of where the formation of ASL took place, location-wise. So yeah. And, like, the first schools of the deaf, you know, as we've gone over, if I'm not mistaken, was in Hartford, you know, which would not be Plains Indian territory. That would be Northeastern Sign. So yeah, it's just like the distinction matters because of the specific genocides each community faced there, you know, and it is important, I think, to recognize our different signs in order to revitalize them, because I believe we can. But on another level, the distinction and the semantics don't necessarily matter in terms of her point kind of does still stand of where American Sign Language came from. But if you'll notice a lot of differences as well, and I believe the reason for the differences would simply be because of Northeastern versus Plains Indian Sign Language. But yeah, alright, let's go for real.
Other languages, and we also had sign languages, which is what ASL is created off of.
That's
from
true.
the PISL. So
That's
like these are things that they don't understand about the history, and then they're speaking on it, and it's like, well, you're telling a very whitewashed version of the history, and if y'all's
I could agree with that.
history gets whitewashed, what makes you think our history doesn't get as equally whitewashed, if not more? because we don't even get our history taught in school.
I felt that they were like just following them for that. I don't know what to call it, their Indigenous chapter. I just felt like they were panning us, and I had to keep reminding them too. Like we've got like in the North Americas alone, like Canada and USA, we've got like over 1,000 tribes here. Like, and you're acting like we all do and know the same thing. I think I even said that to them.
Two things real quick about my volume. One, was I just muted for a second ago? Because that sucks if I was. Two, I'm trying to, so some of the other videos we watched were way lower mixed in volume, so I had raised my mixer all the way up. But this one is like real high where it's showing me that it's redlining. Oh shit. I'm getting a call on here. That's unfortunate. Okay, so one of these is showing me that it's like redlining. God damn, hold on. Who is calling me right now? Where is this ringing from? What tab? I have too many tabs. Oh, found it. It's always during a live stream too. Should I like hang up on it or exit it out? But I need to link to that later. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of ringing for a second. Sorry. Well, it's too late. I should have just hit end. You're welcome. Sorry. Fucking. Anyway, I'll get back to that. I don't know what the fuck I was saying. Isn't it fun? Don't you love this? Okay, I think I had some volume mixing issues. I don't know if that worked out or not. Oh yes, and previously what we were watching was way lower in volume, so now they're way higher. So I tried fixing that with my mixer, but I don't know. I'll try to timestamp this part out. People could skip it maybe. But anyway, yeah. Okay, let's just keep going. My bad.
When they were saying, talking about our creation stories, I'm like, whoa, like, what are you talking about? The funniest thing I found out, or I noticed about Rob, was when he was showing his degrees. He only showed one in a frame, and the other two were still in their folders. And I'm like, why don't you show those ones too? What are you hiding? When I got my degree or my diploma, I framed it right away. It's showing. It's right there. Well, now it is, and I put it in a box a long time ago. But I framed it right away.
I did not frame mine. Maybe I should put it right behind me. But yeah, no, I didn't do that. It's still in my diploma case. Both of mine are. Do people frame those? Is that still a thing? Is that what I should be doing with mine? Because I never fucking did shit with mine, to be honest. I should do that. I should do that. I never did that. It's on my website though, and my LinkedIn profile. I took a picture.
It did not stay in its folder for very long. So it kind of makes me wonder what kind of documents that Rob had in there and that he wasn't showing, like, or what are they, high school documents? Like, what the hell,
Oh, well, generally I could show you mine though. There's a difference there.
I question his education there.
Well, I mean, I'm sure he has stuff. I mean, the thing of it is that they weren't in any kind of science, and then he tried to claim that his technical degrees allowed him to understand the technology. But I was.
So I wonder. So I have a Bachelor of Science, but I didn't study science. I studied music industry studies and business administration. But is that what they could have meant? But then if you had a Bachelor of Science, you would have just said that, right? Or I don't know. But then sometimes when things get go from he said, she said, she said, then other people could have said it differently than how he had said it. I don't know. I wasn't there. Whatever.
Was like, that doesn't even make sense. What's their algorithm? What is their mathematics? What is their coding behind doing this? If you can tell me that, then I can say you understand their technology. But just because you have that's the thing. Like, I have a science degree in health sciences. I don't know shit about physics though. Like, yeah. I'm not a physics, earth sciences and all that are not my thing. I don't know nothing about.
Okay, but you said health sciences. I wonder if BGP will get this joke because some people they get it and they think it's funny, and some people don't. But here's a nerdy pickup line. If you were DNA and I were an enzyme, I'd want to be helicase so I could unzip your genes.
About geology, I'm not good at that type of stuff. I'm not good in the other sciences. That's not my realm. But health sciences is my realm. Biology, all of that. Chemistry, I hate chemistry, but all of that. Pathophysiology, all of those things are like my realm. Health sciences, that everything that has to do with the human body. But you asked me about sciences outside of that. I don't know nothing, and I'll say that. I don't go argue with the flat earthers, because I can't talk about the physics and all of that and the mathematics and all the things that they talk about in the space.
Oh, I'll argue with the flat earthers, but my proposition to them is this. We can't be a flat earth because, by definition, earth is soup. So therefore, we are a bowl. I'm sorry.
Stuff and everything. I don't know nothing about none of that. So I don't
seem
go
like they
argue with
were.
those people, because it's not science that I know. I stay in my lane, and the things that I know and the things that I talk about and the things that I've studied, I stay in my lane. I don't go outside of that. And I just feel more people need to do that, because that's how, if you stay in your lane, then less misinformation gets spread.
Exactly. I just felt that they were trying to invalidate people a lot. Like you, Wida, like he was like, how do we know she's even active in her field? I'm like, dude, she took 2 freaking degrees. Of course she's gonna be like in her field. Who does 2 degrees and isn't practicing what they went?
I know a lot of people with degrees that aren't practicing with their degrees. I know in New Orleans, I actually, when I was a food runner at La Petite Grocery, there was a chick that came to be a food runner, and she had been a paralegal before that. And at the time, I was still in college, and I was like, why would you leave an office job to come work in the service industry? Isn't the goal to get out? In my head, is what I said. And it's like what I was thinking. It's what I said to her, and she was just like, nah, fuck that. I'd rather be here. You make more money, enough stress, service industry. That's where she was at. And at the time, because when you're young, you just want. It's not that you see food service industry as less, but when you got dreams, it's like you want to go do your dream, right? And so at the time, I was like, but I want to go do this and that, and now I'm like, yeah, no, service industry. You make more money. It's way less stressful. Yeah.
School for. Like it was just ridiculous how they kept trying to invalidate education. And then when it was turned around on them, we only saw 1 degree from Rob. We saw nothing from Port or Sutton or Sutek. We saw nothing.
Yeah, I think Sutek and Rob and Mo, they're all in computer science crap. But I mean, and that's cool or whatever, but that doesn't translate to genetics and biology and all of those things, And it's like, me in particularly, I'm really big on race science. Like that's what my whole platform, Fighting the Pretendians, has been, is debunking the race science. It's race, and I think I said it in a million videos. This is racial science. This is promoting scientific racism. This is racial science. This is racial science. Lookership is racial science. Comparing phenotypes is racial science. All of these things are racial science. And what they're doing by saying we are, again, even in science, these terms mean ancestry means something different in, genealogist, a genetic genealogist, which is different from a population geneticist, which is different from an anthropologist, which is different from a historian. And all of those have different meanings to the words ancestry and descendancy. Because it's context behind it. And I even showed them papers of how this is very confusing to the everyday layman's person, because we as layman's people, right, we look at ancestry and descendancy as family, as something tangible, as something hierarchical, when in genetics it's not a hierarchical situation. and that's what they weren't getting. And so it was like, if you're going to say we're descendants of another population group of a whole different culture, then you got to say we're descendants of all of these cultures. If you're going with how, you know, population migration.
You know what's in my head right now? I am he as we are he and we are all together. Yeah, sorry.
Happen. And I was like, and then even then, you guys aren't older than us. Like, I mean, Rob's not older than me. That means I'm not a descendant of him. He's not a descendant of me. That means if my ancestors are Asian, so are his, because we are in the same generation. So like, that's what they weren't understanding. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just, you know, saying you have a direct line because of a haplogroup, that doesn't mean anything. You know, somebody could actually be a European and, you know, have a direct line that has a haplogroup. It's rare, but it happens. Just like it, you know, it, like I said, especially when you got a lot of mixed people, especially within the Latin American diaspora, you got a lot of mixed. So you can have what you think might be your haplogroup, but it turns out it's not your haplogroup because 5 generations back, you know, you had a different person who was in there that was European, and then everybody else from there was native. But that European switched it all up, and now they all carry that one haplogroup from that one European person. So it's not indicative of race and who you particularly come from. It's just a very small snapshot of the genetic picture of humanity as a whole. But to claim that people are descendants of certain groups because of
I don't know shit about that.
haplogroups is not accurate at all and will never be accurate. And then the fact that they are trying to claim autosomal DNA, yes, it does go back to ancient times, to ancient DNA, but the fact is that these actual testing companies that do the autosomal testing, the commercial ones that we all do, the 23andMe, Ancestry.com, all of these testing companies, they themselves, they don't set their algorithm, they set their threshold to only go back to about 5-6 generations to get the most accurate results. If they set it back to go back to ancient times, you're not going to have an accurate result. So, and I even showed them that, and they still wanted to like twist it and walk around it and, you know, do whatever that they wanted to. But at the end of the day,
You know what I find interesting though? So like for me, basically all of my ancestors, there are some exceptions, but I have a lot of ancestors, so let's just highly generalize. In the United States, all of my ancestors are either Native American or they're colonizers, except for the lineage I have where my father, my fifth, his fourth great grandfather is of African American descent on my dad's side. Um, besides that, everybody else is like either Native American or European. And I have to go back, like, for the most part, like 7 or 8 generations just to find out where any of those motherfuckers come from. Oh, I'm trying not to use that word no more. Okay, working on that. But anyway, yeah. I have to go back that far and figure out where the fuck they come from. So I'm interested, like, what does, like, the possibilities and the chances of where I like get my traits from. Sometimes I do have curiosity from that, like how do I look the way I am, or where do I get certain traits from. I like comparing myself to my mom and dad and ancestors and that I have, you know, the pictures of and everything. But I don't know, I feel like that's kind of normal maybe to be curious about. But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna keep playing this.
I was like, I think I've proven it enough. I've explained it enough. If people have questions, they can ask, but I'm not, if they don't want to come and actually learn or have the discussion, cool. If they just want to debate, then it's not going to work because they don't understand the concepts that they're talking about. Because I even asked them, I was like, does mitochondrial DNA and Y DNA, if they come together, does that make autosomal DNA? And they all answered yes. Well, that's not how that works either. So at that point, that basicness of genetics right there tells me you can't even explain the genetics that you're talking about, but you want to tell an entire group of people who we're descended from off of the science that you don't understand. It made no sense to me. That's why I was more mad at them than anything.
I found it funny how they kept moving the goalpost, and whenever I guess I don't want to say lost, but whenever Port, like you corrected Port, he would come back with his video. Okay, fam, I guess they're saying this, like he's gaining sympathy and whatever. Like, fam, my fam, like he kept doing that, like he wanted backup. I'm like, dude, you got yourself into this little hole here. Why are you looking towards your family to back you up? Just be a man and admit you're wrong or deal with it. But I didn't see that.
The other thing they kept doing was conflating creation stories with migration stories. And that was the other thing I noticed that they kept doing. And it's like a creation story is not the same thing as a migration story. And the migration stories are much different than the creation stories. And you guys are literally trying to make fun of creation stories and conflate the two things. And that's not okay. That's anti-native.
That pissed me off. That actually did piss me off how they were making fun of it and saying it wasn't science and whatever. And somebody was talking about our creation story, like my tribe, and how it lined up with African circle of life thing. And I'm like, but that's my creation story. That's how my ancestors passed it down to us, which was way before Africa even came to this continent. So how is it that they're same? I don't know. Maybe it is the same creation story, but that's what we were told. But even behind that,
A lot of tribes have similar creation stories. I don't really feel like that should be something that people argue about, in my opinion.
creation story, there's still science. We were put into the earth. We knew that the earth absorbed our bodies, and we grew. We ate the plants and whatever, and so we were recreated that way. It's kind of like a reincarnation. And they're trying to say that there was no science behind it, and I'm like, there is total science behind it. Like they kept trying to invalidate things they had no concept of, and they're like, don't come at us with science. And then we come at them with science, and then they're like, well, that's not the science I'm talking about. It's just, they were sounding a lot like the Pretendians after a while.
They were. Social distortion. I don't know who you're talking to, but I know who I am. Thank you. But I'm glad you think you know more than me. Appreciate it. See, I told you, it's weird. These people think they know me. But yeah, I know who I am. I know who I descend from. But thank you for thinking you know more than me. I'm sure a lot of people said that I have said things that I've never said, but please, why don't you ask me instead of going by hearsay? That would be the best thing to do.
That would be the most common thing a person would do. But oh, sorry, you know what? Mama's is the only one that can bring you up because you're on private. Okay, Mom. I can't even see you on the list, bro. Mamas.
Yeah, she didn't give us full mod powers. She only gave us like some mod powers. She has to actually go in and give us full mod powers.
Yeah. That's what I kept telling her, because I'm like, I can't pin comments. I can't do anything. I know. Mamas.
And she didn't say when she was coming back.
What's that?
I said, and she didn't say when she was coming back.
No, she didn't. I forgot what I was saying now. The people, it's common sense to ask people about the things you hear about them, but I noticed it's not like that on this app. A lot of people like to gossip and believe in the gossip. But then a lot of people like to lie too, so I don't know, I guess it goes both ways. Hold on, I'm grabbing my dog. He went out to pee.
Yeah.
And then you have certain people who you show the evidence of everything you say about them, then they want to say a bunch of crazy shit about you that they can't prove anything of because none of it's fucking true. And then they get mad at you for showing the evidence you have on them. Meanwhile, they keep saying don't say shit for you that you don't have proof for while they're invalidating your evidence, but they don't prove any fucking thing they ever say. So interesting. But yeah, that's what I'm reminding me of now. All right, this is almost done here. But yeah, just, I didn't want to do a live stream on a clip of what someone said without providing what the rest of the context I had for it was as well.
I mean, if you really want to know, all you have to do is ask. You don't have to assume. You can ask whenever. And I will tell you, I've never been shy of my journey. Yeah, they do. A lot of people just jump on the bandwagons. It's how they feel they get accepted in a social circle, I guess. And then come down later on down the line. I'm sorry. Should have listened to you. You were right. Not my problem.
Okay, social distortion. What is your problem? Like, you seem to be holding a lot of animosity towards BGP. Care to share?
Yeah, I'd like to know because I don't even know who you are. Why do you not like me?
Okay, so I think that is kind of everything that I have for you guys today. I need to remember to link, because I accidentally have the muted video linked, so I need to go link the video that's not muted, I think. But yeah, besides that, everything should be linked in the description of the video. The few random shit that I googled, I'll add to the description. It might all get moved. Some links might get moved to the comments later when I timestamp. We'll see what the fuck happens. But in a nutshell today, I basically just kind of addressed the concept of my thoughts on if American Sign Language was based off of plain Indian Sign Language. And in a nutshell, I can see why you would think that or say that, but I actually do not believe it was. I believe it was based on Eastern Algonquian Sign Language and Northeastern Sign Languages. But I believe the reason people think that is because all Indigenous Sign Languages have commonalities, shared signs, shared ways of signing, and were used intertwined for commerce and things of that nature. It's how we all communicated intertribally. And so there's a lot of similarities, but there's also some differences. So we discussed the history of American Sign Language and the formation of American Sign Language today, as it relates to that statement as well. And then we kind of went on some side tangents, but we also, such as, deaf musicians and shit like that, and Alexander Graham Bell. But we also went over my sources for everything I've said, as well as past content I've covered, which is kind of one and the same in some ways there. And then we watched the full clip for the context of that statement as well. And we're here now, and that's what we did today. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for joining me. We'll see what I do next. I want to cover the Google Monopoly live streams coming up, but if I go live tomorrow, I might do something else instead, just because it's Sunday. So why not think about work until the weekday, maybe. But we'll see. Maybe I'll go ahead and bang that out. I don't know. But yeah, coming up, the Google Monopoly coverage is coming. I've got more hair content covering. Did I say covering? I meant to say coming. Whatever. I'm going to be covering more hair content. And Manny did request I cover him, so I will be doing that as well coming up. We got a mixed bag of things happening that are in the works, as well as some more of my personal story will be coming soon. I'm not rushing myself on that. It'll get here when it gets here, okay? It could be next year. I don't give a fuck. It'll be ready when it's ready. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna roll my outro. Thank you for joining me today and stopping in and everything of that nature. I appreciate you guys. I hope y'all have a great evening. And yeah, thanks for being here and good night.
Thanks for watching. Join the loyalty program at nola-child.com/loyalty and check in during live streams to get points for rewards.